Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Lions Grid. I am your host, Kevin Marheine, joined today by Mr. Jeffrey Raymond. Jeffrey, happy Tuesday evening to you. How you doing here? How's your week going?
Week's going good so far. It is Tuesday, what I consider to be the worst day of the week statistically and emotionally, but we'll get through it. We get to talk about some football, so I'm ready to roll.
Yeah, unfortunately, today is not as, I guess, exciting of a day as it could have been, given the outcome of the game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Jeffrey. And let's just dive right in here and let's start talking about this Tampa Bay Detroit Lions game. So I'll go ahead here and just bring up some stats that we'll be talking about as sort of the backdrop here. But Jeffrey, I mean, if you look at just the box score, right? The Lions pretty much dominated in every category, but in you can see there at the top, the ones that really matter, that score line, 20-16, Tampa Bay gets that victory over the Lions. The dogs are, you can hear, the dogs aren't happy about it either. Just no one really.
It was because they would be looking at this box score and thinking, well, how did Detroit lose? I mean, we were putting up numbers here, as you can see. But there were just a few kind of key things that kind of brought us down. Turnover battle, and Baker Mayfield really kind of just like showing out when he needed to be playing at his best, and he kind of led them to victory there.
Yeah, and we have to shout out that Tampa Bay defense as well. Yes, they gave up a lot of yards. They were able to force the takeaways, and they had that sort of like bend not break mentality, right? They gave up a lot of yards, but they didn't give up a lot of points. And, we talked about it. That secondary was banged up. They were still able to be successful against a Lions offense that is very capable, and really, ultimately help them get the W here.
Yeah, it's super surprising because their top guys, especially in the secondary, are out with injury. So these are like backup players, people they've coached up, young players, and they played a pretty good game against a offense that's supposed to be pretty good. Right. And clearly they're pretty good based on the numbers they put up. But ultimately, the points matter at the end.
And their defensive front, too, was able to get pressure on Jared Goff, make him very uncomfortable there in the pocket. And that was even without Kalijah Kancey. I was calling him out in the pregame, and he didn't even play. It was just Will Golston and crew out there, and they were able to make it a very uncomfy day for Jared Goff. I saw something about his stats specifically when he was under pressure, and that's when both of his interceptions happened, and he only had like 100 some odd yards. So he was definitely a very different quarterback when Tampa Bay was able to get pressure on him than when he was able to stand back there in a clean pocket. And very surprising. If we take a look here, so obviously these are just the total team stats. But if we take a look at the next item here, you can see third down efficiency. There were the couple of fourth down plays where, we continue. First of all, I'm very happy that Dan Campbell going for it with that fake punt on fourth down from inside our 5-yard line. I'm very happy that converted for a first down, because if that hadn't, like, I don't even know. Like, how that would have impacted the game would have been crazy. But as good as we were on fourth and third down, Jeffrey, we really struggled from inside the red zone. We were only 1 for 7 in the red zone, so that's not on here. But big struggles come.
That's uncharacteristic of us, because we've been leading the NFL, especially last year, in red zone efficiency, getting points once we're down there. And that's what sealed up these playoff games against the Rams and the Buccaneers in the last playoffs. But we weren't able to get it done today. And we left a few points on the board, because you had mentioned, thank goodness that fake punt worked. Because, when we're living in the Dan Campbell era, we got to live with some gambling. He did say put on some diapers last year, because it's going to get a little touch and go there. But I do appreciate his aggressiveness. But there was a point where he actually took blame for this loss right in the post-game presser about a decision he made where he didn't go for the points. And turns out we needed some points at the end. So he did say, like, the players did everything I asked, but I take this blame on him. And I would have to agree. He should have went for the points there.
Yeah, he did. He even said it going in at halftime. He said, I made a mistake there. the team's gonna have to overcome it in the second half, and ultimately they just weren't able to overcome it. I mean, they
Yeah.
definitely had opportunities, but Jeffrey, you also talked about last week, this being week two, us getting a second data point. I think we attributed maybe the Lions' offensive struggles last week to just being a little bit of rust, right? The starters didn't really play in the preseason. It was their first game back. They were going up against a team like the Rams, who are pretty good, although they got abused by the Cardinals, but we'll get to that in a minute when we grind the grid. But you know, it was surprising to see them have these issues against Tampa Bay. And Jeffrey, I think the question for me is going to be: all right, we've had two games. The offense was able to put up a lot of yards, but they weren't able to really get into the end zone and put up points. weren't able to score touchdowns. They had to settle for field goals in some situations. And really, to be a team where you can feel confident that you're going to beat the better teams in the NFL, you need to get touchdowns when you should get touchdowns, and be able to get the ball across the goal line. And they struggled with that. So I think, Jeffrey, I guess my question to you is: how concerned are you with this Lions offense? Do you think perhaps people are starting to figure out this Ben Johnson offense? Maybe some of the magic is starting to disappear because after 3 seasons, people are starting to get an idea of how to stop this offense? Or do you think it's more of an issue where, hey, it's only been 2 weeks, this Lions offense, like a fine wine, is only gonna get better with time? Which side of the coin are you on here?
That's where I'm on the side of the coin. I think it's only 2 games here. They they last year, even like we started out strong. We dropped to Baltimore early. I just think not having that preseason with the starters going really affects it. I mean, I know for player health, I think it's great, but I think we kind of have to um, be ready for some of these teams to come out and look flat. But overall, offenses have not been doing great so far in these past 2 weeks. It's been defenses dominating, and I think a lot of it has to do with kind of these concepts that these offenses are running, because we ran a lot of motion last year. Ben Johnson's very much about running that style of offense that Kyle Shanahan uses. Then I was watching Philadelphia play. They ran almost no motion last year, but almost every play, like from the get go, they were installed an offense that looked like very similar to ours. So I think it's like an ebb and flow going on. Defenses are starting to figure out that aspect of the game after the offense kind of innovated with running all of those like motions and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's but I still think it takes several weeks for NFL teams to get it going. Dan Campbell said it best when he was on Hard Knocks, being like, guys, like I've got a plan, and at week 8, when everything comes together, like we're gonna pop off. And then that season, it was that season, the next season, that's when we started our incredible run, and then ended Aaron Rodgers' playoff hopes and the Packers at the end of the season. But that's where I stand on it.
Yeah, I think as Detroit Fan Man pointed out here in the comments, if we can uh, take a look here and really focus in on the details, like if we can clean some things up, I think the Lions' worst enemy through the first 2 weeks has been the Lions. So if we can clean things up, if we can really focus in, we've seen some good things, and we'll take a look here in just a second at some of those good things out of this team. But I think really, ultimately, when you're in the first 2 weeks taking on two teams that were in the NFC playoffs last year, and you split 1-1 to start the season, I think that's pretty good. So all things considered, obviously, I think there was a chance for them to start 2-0. They dropped this game to Tampa Bay, and yes, when the season's all said and done, and seeding's getting figured out, this may be a game that we forget, or that we really regret dropping, because we could have won it. But to your point, Jeffrey, I think there's plenty of time for this team to gel and come together. And again, there are a lot of encouraging things we are seeing, even though losses are happening. And I know even Dan Campbell had said when he took, when he took the blame for the loss, he did say, I asked to see improvement this week, and he saw it. It was just because of his, as he said, the coaching mistakes outweighed that improvement that they saw. So as long as this team continues to get better each week, I definitely like our chances. So, I mean, really, a tip of the hat to Tampa Bay. They played well. I shouldn't say they played well, because if you look at the stats, again, we sort of dominated them in almost every statistical area, but they did enough to get the win, and that's, kudos to them. But again, a lot of that was capitalizing on Lions' mistakes. So if we can clean those up, could be a different story. But one thing we don't need to clean up, Jeffrey, taking a look here, and I know we may be
Oh
seeing
yeah.
a little bit more of this man later on when you get to your champ of the week. But after 2 weeks here, 5.5 sacks, and you can see there are 18 teams in the NFL that have less sacks than Aiden Hutchinson. Just by himself, 5.5, more than 18 of the other teams here in the NFL.
That the sample, I will say, although sample size too, I mean, he actually went off in this game. It was nuts. People are starting to be like, what? When are we going to start putting him into the same conversation as like a Myles Garrett or a Watt? And I think if he like continues this kind of production for the next couple games, I think we can start thinking about some Defensive Player of the Year kind of stuff.
Yeah, I know I had said it earlier as a thing that I thought could happen, and now I've actually heard other people on ESPN, Fox, NFL Network. I've heard other people start to mention Defensive Player of the Year for him. So it's starting. It's definitely taking root here. So yeah, hopefully he can continue this hot start he's on, because yeah, I think obviously he almost set the single game franchise record for sacks, but I think he can definitely hit the single season franchise record for sacks as well. So hopefully we can continue to see Aiden really capitalize on this hot streak he's started the season out on. And then taking a look here at some of the pro football focus grades, some of the players that did well on offense, we see a couple of offensive linemen there. Of course, Jack Fox, who did throw that first down on the fake punt. I want to say heard something about him being like 9 for 11 or something like that as his like all-time pass, or like his all-time pass attempts. So he's back there just throwing dimes as the punter. So it's great to have him there. But then of course some of the players that we saw struggle, and one in particular that was surprising to me. Obviously we know Jared Goff had a sort of mixed day, so seeing him there with a low score. But the one that really is surprising to me is Frank Ragnow, right? A Pro Bowl center, one of the guys that we look to be sort of an anchor on this team. He did struggle a little bit here against Tampa Bay. Certainly definitely a guy I would expect to bounce back. But, Jeffrey, we've talked about the offensive line being a strength for this Lions team. You can see two of his fellow linemen on the best offensive scorers for the Lions. What are your thoughts there about seeing Frank Ragnow struggle against Tampa Bay?
I think overall with the offensive line, it's ultimately a unit, right? So, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And, he's a veteran, and I think he'll bounce back from it. And, I would just put it to it's week 2 kind of thing. Like we just haven't seen enough. Now, if he shows up here next week, now we got to say, what's going on with that unit? Why is Ragnow getting left out here?
Absolutely. And then shout out to two guys on the defense. Brian Branch bouncing back after a rough game against Atlanta. Good to see that. Against the Rams. Good to see him bounce back there. And then DJ Reader in his debut also making it there with one of the top scorers for our defense. So
he made life easier for Hutchinson. I mean, he's a big man that they've got to eat those blocks for, and leaves Hutch outside one-on-one finally, starting to win those matchups.
Once he's back at full strength, you see Alan McNeil there as well. Hutch, we see Davenport be out there fully healthy. It could be really scary if this defensive line, all the pieces get healthy, can come out there and gel together. I think we're seeing what could be the start of a very, very nasty pass rush unit there, which definitely, it has repercussions beyond just them playing well. It helps out the secondary and everything like that. So exciting to see that.
Shout out to Aaron Glenn. I mean, people after the first couple seasons here, people were saying maybe we should drop this guy. Our secondary is the worst in the league, all this stuff. But, you got to give this time for these players to get cooking here. Looking like we have a pretty good defense on our hand.
Yeah, absolutely. If you told me that the defense was going to hold in back-to-back weeks 2 playoff teams from last year to 20 points each, I mean, I'll take that, especially
Yeah,
with our offense. You definitely expect them to be able to score more than 20 points. So,
yeah,
two solid performances so far out of Aaron Glenn in this defensive unit, as far as I'm concerned. And Detroit fan man calling out here that the defensive line somehow being better than the offensive line already
it has
is
been. It
it's.
has.
But I love the fact that it is both sides, the trenches on both sides of the ball that are sort of leading the way.
Yeah,
Uh,
gone are the days where we're throwing Stafford back there with no O line. Be like, just chuck it up to somebody. Megatron might be up there. Just throw it.
Drop back 3 seconds, get rid of it. Just let it
Yeah.
let it fly. And then some other good news. Well, potentially good news. We'll have to keep an eye on it here. But Adam Schefter, let's see, are we going? There we go. Reporting that even though he was hobbled during Sunday's game, Amon-Ra St. Brown is at the moment only reported to have a contusion and cramping was the extent of the injury. So, obviously he was limited a little bit there in that fourth quarter, Jeffrey, but the fact that the injury itself doesn't appear at this time to be anything injury, especially when we're seeing a lot of big injuries across the league,
Yeah.
uh, you know, encouraging there that right now it's just being reported as a contusion and cramping.
Yeah, he was clearly banged up several points in the game, just labored walking. They took him out towards the end and having us to force a timeout at the end. He's a tough dude though. I mean, he played all year with that injury they didn't tell anybody about with his ribs, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I just had these fractures here. We're good." But yeah, it'd be nice if we and I think the offense overall. I mean, by the numbers, not by the points, by the numbers, we're seeming to be doing good. Our weapons are playing well. JMO has had another good game, so hopefully we don't have to like completely rely on Amon-Ra St. Brown every game. Let him get let's get his usage down and spread those targets out.
Yeah, and as a Detroit fan man says there, let's lean on that offensive line too. We did it there in overtime against the Rams. Let's see some more of that. David Montgomery, Gibbs, let them run behind the big fellas, let them eat, and let's see some success there. And shout out to Hatter's House there, 7110. Definitely glad to see you back here in the comments. And yeah, Ben Johnson and Jared Goff, definitely room for improvement on both of those fronts. And Jeffrey, before we dig in and do grind the grid here, wanted to get your thoughts. We've seen, or I've definitely seen a lot of discussion out there right now from Lions fans. People who don't like Jared Goff, I don't think are ever going to be a fan of Jared Goff. Obviously, we gave him the extension. He is our quarterback for the foreseeable future. But what are your thoughts there? Where are you at in that camp? I think I imagine based off of what we've talked about already, you're in that camp of it's week 2. Give him time to cook. Things will work themselves out. But through 2 weeks, what are your thoughts about what we've seen out of Jared Goff so far?
Yeah, he does look a little rusty for sure. And I'm full bias. I'm a fan of Jared Goff. I'm totally cool with him and the extension that he got. Because I think they built around his strengths in this offense, and one of them is having a good offensive line. Hopefully, will arrive soon here, as Detroit fan man says. But when he's protected, he throws dimes, right? And his grades under pressure are bad, right? They're not good. Even in this game, they weren't good. But they ultimately, I am kind of on the 2 week thing, but he has looked a little rusty. So I'm hoping we can have some kind of vintage Jared Goff game here in the next couple games here, where he's just absolutely lights out.
Yeah, I would say, and mind you, I had my spicy prediction that if the O line stayed healthy, he would be the NFL's MVP this season. I'm not going to backtrack yet, but through 2 weeks, he has not been doing a whole lot to prove me right. And I think the biggest concern for me on that front is the fact that he hasn't, traditionally he's been a guy who's taken care of the ball. He hasn't in his first couple of seasons here hasn't had a lot of terrible turnovers, and turnovers, especially in games like that where we're dominating statistically, the momentum change there that they can have are really the big impacts. And so, that certainly has hurt us. He has been a little more, he's had 3 interceptions already on the season. Would certainly like to see him do a better job of taking care of that ball and get back to being, that guy that we see who isn't going to lose the game for us. But yeah, it's week 2. We have a lot of room to go. And again, I am kind of curious though. That conversation about have defenses started to figure out the Ben Johnson offense here in Detroit, and that's kind of what the issue is, or is it something where it is the rust? We need more data. We have a small sample size, but I am kind of interested to see how that plays out. And taking a look down the road, we're going to be playing the Vikings and Chicago, and both of those defenses look pretty gross to have to go up against. So it's not going to be an easy road for the Lions. So yeah, this offense definitely needs to get things in gear, and we'll see how it goes. Detroit fan man there. Goff is dependently masterful with a clean pocket, but the O line was dreadful, and yeah, definitely they struggled. Of course, Penei Sewell did have that ankle injury that was sort of bothering him all week as well. He, in particular, wasn't a weak spot, but they did shift the line around a little bit, and I wonder if that is because of the injury that was there to him. If that impacted the cohesiveness of the unit and its effectiveness. So, we'll keep an eye on that moving forward. And then, Jeffrey, the last question I have for you here is around, the best possible outcome for the Lions now before their bye week. They have a bye week in week 5. They have 2 games remaining before then. They have the upcoming game against the Cardinals, which we'll be talking about on Sunday, and they have a game against Seattle. And of course, those
Seattle never plays a normal game. Never plays a normal game. And we got to play them.
And it's a chance for revenge because, of course, they were an issue for us last year. Similar to how the Buccaneers just beat us in week 2. The Seahawks were that team last year. So, and of course, we're taking them on Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football that week is actually a doubleheader. You have the Titans and the Dolphins, and then you have the Seahawks and the Lions squaring off that week. But that's in 2 weeks. So, Cardinals, Seahawks, 2 NFC West teams. And so 2 games to go before the bye. I think really, and I want to get your opinion on it, what is sort of the best outcome for the Lions considering that they have the 2 weeks until the bye week? Is going 3-1 to start the season with nobody major on IR? I think that's probably the best situation for them, but what are your thoughts there about what would be, sort of best case for the Lions as we try to make it to the bye week?
Yeah, I think because, look at the quarter season, typically teams kind of take it at a quarter at a time kind of thing.
The Dominic Toretto approach, quarter mile at a time.
Yeah, that's right. It's all about the family, man. It's going to be difficult. I mean, the Cardinals look good. They look really good. It's going to be interesting to see that rookie matchup with our new cornerback and Marvin Harrison Jr. out there. Yeah, I would say 3-1 without anybody on IR. But at worst, if we drop all these games, might be getting ugly here in Detroit.
I mean, you're already kind of getting that. It's very much a roller coaster with the Detroit fan base, right? And I think that's partially because, rightfully so, Lions fans have had to endure some really terrible football. So there's a lot of trauma there, right? So as soon as things start to not go well, I do understand why a lot of people are like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah, right.
They fall back to that same old Lions team. I definitely don't think SOL applies anymore to this Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes era. But certainly when you do have a lot of expectations on you, it is, people are expecting this team as to be a favorite to make it to the Super Bowl and represent the NFC. So anything short of that is going to feel like failure.
Yeah.
And that puts a lot of pressure on teams. So we'll have to see how they can handle that.
And Dan Campbell, I mean, he said it best. I mean, he's like, at the end of last year, he's like, it's going to be totally different next time because now we're going to have the target on our back. Like, we were treading water for a long time as a franchise, right? And then we came out of nowhere that year. I mean, people thought we'd be good, but one game away from the Super Bowl, that puts a target on your back for sure. And teams are going to want to play you at their best now. So,
and I think Tampa Bay is actually at that point too. They've quietly been one of the best NFC teams for several seasons now in terms of wins, and they sort of just been quietly chugging along. But I think now teams, especially after beating the Lions, who were a team that was on everyone's power rankings pretty high, I think the cat might be out of the bag about Tampa Bay as well. I am glad to see that Detroit fan man's PTSOL is still dormant. And he did feel that tingle there with the end of the half mismanagement.
Oh
And I got to, Jeffrey, this is 2 weeks in a row with the the end of the half mismanagement.
And I was just praising him last week, being like, when he started, like he was doing all kinds of things. He was being aggressive. I loved it, all that kind of thing. But like, you got to take the points, and plus he's got a pretty good kicker too. I mean,
Mhm.
as far as the
Jake
kicker,
Bates has been
yeah,
lights
the
out
kickers
so
across
far.
the NFL. I mean, they've been really rocking it. Surprisingly, Justin Tucker's not been having a good year beyond 50, but
Yeah,
but there,
that is surprising.
but tons of kickers are doing this, and I feel like it the lack of points there, it cost us in the NFC Championship game too. So that is kind of the line we ride with Dan Gamble.
It most certainly is. It most certainly is. And yeah, one final question, because I did hear this thought. So we spent our third round pick on Hendon Hooker, and of course, the future is still yet to be written for him in terms of what he will ultimately contribute to the Lions franchise. But still available at the time, and obviously we have Jake Bates now, who is doing a fantastic job kicking. But Jake Moody, the Michigan kicker, would have been available at that point, and he has been pretty automatic so far for the 49ers. Well, in a what if universe, Jeffrey, do you think where are you at? Do you think the Lions maybe should have invested that third round pick in Jake Moody instead of taking the flyer on Hendon Hooker? Or what are your thoughts there?
Man, I
How
think
big of a Hendon Hooker fan are you? Is what it comes down to.
I feel neutral about him. I guess his college highlights look good, but the NFL is a totally different game, and he was injured, so we haven't seen much of him
Mhm.
yet outside of preseason. He looked pretty good in the preseason, pretty tanky out there trying to truck people, but I'd say just hindsight is 2020 on that. I mean, they were at a point even a couple years ago where Goff had just come in, and we were still trying to figure out, is this team working? We have these young guys. We have this big contract with Goff. So I think they kind of went the more safer route there. Be like, let's take a chance on a quarterback in case Goff doesn't work out. Try to unload that contract. But obviously that didn't
Mhm.
happen. And we got the extension and that great Lions season out of it. But yeah, I'd say hindsight's 2020 in that. I think they made the right decision overall.
Yeah, those what if questions are pretty unfair. Although I will say, when it comes to Hendon Hooker, I hope he does. Like, I appreciate the toughness. I like the trying to go for extra yards. But if Tua has shown us anything, man, you gotta slide and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Don't be putting yourself in a position where you're gonna hurt, could get injured. Or, I mean, at the very least, if you are gonna be going headfirst into defenders, at least wear one of those Halo top things, because that, I mean,
I saw.
I,
I see a few players with those sprinkled on there.
yeah,
They,
I mean, as a player, if it was an option for me, someone who has played the game and has had, taken a fair share of hits to the head, if it was an option for me, I would definitely have worn it. Just, I mean, I know there's the rule of cool and looking good and all that good stuff, but man, when it comes to saving you from having to go through some of that stuff that comes with concussions, you know, that is, I think your health needs to come first. Same with like hockey players and like the thing to prevent them from like getting their neck slashed and like all that.
oh
Like,
yeah,
I'm always for, yeah, it doesn't look cool, but like, I want the protection. Like, it's
yeah,
a game.
right,
I don't want to die out there on the field and be like known as the guy,
right,
the
right,
player that died. So,
right. It's like wearing a cup. They're not comfortable, but you need them.
you'd be surprised about how many guys don't actually wear it.
Really? Oh
Yeah,
man, when I was playing any kind of sport, contact sport, cup for sure. You got to
I'm in that
protect the
same boat.
jewels.
It only takes once for you to realize you should have that on. But I guess for some guys, they feel it's worth the risk. I don't know. But we'll jump back in here, Jeffrey, and of course we have our stats from earlier. But without any further, well, I guess now that we've sort of covered the Lions, It's time for the next segment here, Jeffrey, and we're going to go ahead and grind the grid and go across the NFL. Of course, this week did start off, as mentioned, with Tua already, and we talked about during our episode on Sunday, the Bills and the Dolphins. The Bills got that win 31-10, and of course, the big news out of there, Tua's injury, and rumors has it that he has been seeking individual neurological consults and things like that, but that he's been doing it with the desire to come back and play. You know, Jeffrey,
They
we
did
talked
put him on IR just like an hour ago.
Oh,
A couple
okay.
hours
Okay.
ago. Yeah, so at
Was
least
it
he's
like
going to be out.
season-ending IR, or is it
No,
that
like
IR
they're
designated for
doing
return?
they're going to do
The
the
4-weeker.
four game one,
Okay.
and he's going to get looked at by those neurologists like you were talking about.
Okay.
But he, like you said, he intends to try to come back. Which
It's interesting. I'm not going to blame him. It's his life. He can do
Yeah.
what he wants to do, but those are some, like, concussions are never good, but those images of him like laying on the field and his fingers just contorting like that that's pretty haunting. So I've never really seen anything like that, but it's his decision. So whatever he wants to do, as long as he's healthy and safe. The 49ers and the Vikings, Jeffrey, and I talked about this being another example. This Vikings defense being able to help them get the win 23-17 over San Francisco. Of course, San Francisco is without Christian McCaffrey, who is a big part of their offense. He's on IR now for at least 4 games. But Sam Darnold, I mean, that touchdown pass he had to Justin Jefferson, it was a 97-yarder. And yes, Justin Jefferson did a lot after the catch to get into the end zone, but Darnold, man, he did toss that thing.
He's had 2 good games in a row. He's had 2 good games in a row. Watch out, man. He's not seeing ghosts anymore.
I mean, him and Baker Mayfield, they didn't have the most impressive starts to their career. They're both from the same draft class, but just like Geno Smith, to an extent, you know, hey, they might have struggled at their first opportunity, maybe even struggled with their second opportunity, but now they've been able to turn things around, and both are leading their teams to victory. So
hopefully Bryce Young can do that, follow in that footstep, maybe.
Maybe. We'll talk about him in just a second. And then speaking of Geno Smith, they got the victory 23-20 over the Patriots in overtime. DK Metcalf had himself a game, as well as Smith and Njigba. So you're seeing the old veteran, the young guy, both of them stepping up to help get the Seahawks win. And the Patriots, I mean, they gave them all they could handle, took them to overtime. So again, that team that everyone thought was going to be one of the worst in the NFL, sticking to it and not making things easy. Then we had a NFC East showdown in the Giants against the Commanders. The Commanders getting the win here, 21-18. The Giants and Malik Neighbors had himself a day. Looked like I know fantasy owners were kind of regretting that because Danny Dimes has looked like garbage, but Malik Neighbors definitely looks legitimate. And the Giants, in a game they should have won, they did end up losing this because apparently it's the Giants thing that they kind of have the same old lines. They're going to find inventive ways to lose games now is what the Giants are going to do. And a game they could have won, dropping it 21-18 to the Commanders. And I like Detroit Fan Man here, trying to keep us a little grounded, saying, what can you say about Sam Darnold that you couldn't say about Josh Dobbs after the same number of games? So we'll have to. I mean, it's true. A very good point. You got to pump the brakes on that.
After those first 2 games, man. So
we can't get too ahead of ourselves praising him, but he has looked good through 2 games. And then I know he just mentioned it for regulation. We had Jeffrey. I know this one is your game to talk about, but the Panthers and the Chargers here.
Yeah, this this was not good. Again, Carolina came out and was just woeful in pretty much every sense of the terms. Bryce Young looked bad. He looks defeated. This is the worst part. It's not like he's, grinding it out there. You can clearly see he's not having a good time. He's not confident. Post-game interview, he's like, "What do you say about your confidence now?" And he's like, "My confidence is in God." And I was like, "Ooh, you're right." He's letting Beasley take the wheel for this at this point. I mean, he did get absolutely screwed last year with the kind of the whole organization really, and they didn't really do much to get stuff around him now. But it's clear that he is not cutting it. And on Monday, he was benched for the return of Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle, reloaded, man, coming back. But I think if they would have kept trotting out Bryce Young out there, I think some locker rooms might have been lost, kind of thing. So they're benching him. Came as a surprise to Bryce Young, as he says, but yeah, we'll be watching that closely. On the other side, J.K. Dobbins popping off, coming off of a couple years of devastating injuries. He's shown that he can still do it. He did a somersault in the end zone, which kind of scared me. I was like, oh God, please don't pop that ACL doing that. But yeah, he's absolutely rolling. The fighting Harbaughs are 2-0.
Yeah, and his return to the NFL 2-0. Love to see that, don't we? Just love that as Michigan State fans. Love to see Jim Harbaugh having lots of success. It's great. Tremendous. Then Jeffrey, New Orleans versus Dallas.
Another utter destruction of Dallas coming out here not looking good. The most well-paid quarterback in the league, not getting it done. Alvin Kamara going off. Should New Orleans be taken seriously in that NFC South?
Yeah, that new offense they have down there.
Yeah.
Derek Carr is looking amazing. Rashid Shaheed is good for like one long touchdown to start every game out of nowhere. Like, I mean, it's only been 2 weeks, but the Saints definitely popping off. And to your point, I think the most roller coastery team in the NFL is the Cowboys. At no point can someone go, I think, from being the Lions kind of do a little bit because fans do get a little antsy when we start to lose, but like nothing goes quicker from the talks of Super Bowl champs to dumpster fire faster than the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh, yeah.
And that was on full display this Sunday.
Absolutely.
They just,
Shout out to Troy Fanman. I love that too because I'm not a big fan of Dallas. So whoever's playing them, I'm rooting for them.
I immediately support the other team. Jeffrey, another NFC North team in action, taking on Indy at home. The Packers were. What do you got here for the Packers and the Colts?
Yeah, so Malik Willis throwing his first touchdown pass in the NFL, so that was great for him. Anthony Richardson didn't look as sharp as he did in that first game. He's throwing those moonball touchdowns, and I think Green Bay played them pretty well, and they ran the hell out of the ball. They gave Josh Jacobs 32 touches, and he turned that in 151 yards. So they were absolutely rolling back there. I think the lack of scoring is honestly just having Malik Willis as your quarterback, really. But they're just gonna rely on their run game until Jordan Love comes back, and I think Malik Willis will kind of get some residual pop because of the offense being that decent.
Yeah, I'm really surprised to see the Colts struggle as much as they are for as talented of a team as they are. And I guess, the Packers definitely getting the win there. Although Josh Jacobs did, they gave him the bag in the offseason to bring him in, but he did drop that ball on his way into the end zone. So they did drop a touchdown that way. I did see that. So
he giveth and he taketh.
Yep, and I definitely think you're right. The focus on the running game certainly a symptom of the fact that Jordan Love is currently out of commission. Then, Jeffrey, we have up here a matchup between one team that we weren't quite sure if they'd ever get a win, and then a team that is definitely disappointing so far on the season, Cleveland heading into Jacksonville. What do you got for us here?
Yeah, so defense is still carrying Cleveland. Deshaun Watson had an okay day, but he's definitely not the quarterback they were advertised when he was down in Houston.
Worst trade ever.
Yeah, seriously. And the Jags, I mean, they just look mediocre. I feel like Doug Peterson's starting to coach for his job a little bit. Trevor Lawrence is not delivering as much as he has been billed as far as being kind of a generational talent. Like I said, there's still time, but I think the Jags another disappointing start to the season.
Yeah, they really have been struggling. Brian Thomas has really looked like their only wide receiver at this point. Christian Kirk is definitely not carrying the load, and of course they got rid of Calvin Ridley as well. So that offense looks looking gross, and certainly gonna call into question Doug Peterson's future. And then it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with Cleveland. Again, that defense I think is playoff caliber, but that offense, as we've talked about, struggles. And of course, Deshaun Watson. The rumors out there about him and these latest allegations and there being video and stuff like that. It's going to be interesting to see how long he is behind center for Cleveland, whether it be from off the field activities or just not playing well on the field. Maybe just give Jameis Winston the ball anyways, just because he might give you a better chance to win. Who knows? We'll have to see how that plays out. Then we had the Aaron Rodgers led Jets heading into Tennessee to take on the Titans, and Will Levis did not do any favors here. He had a tough turnover in week 1, and he did the exact same thing here in week 2 against the Jets. And Coach Brian Callahan let him have it, and honestly gave one of the most honest sort of bits of feedback I've ever seen a coach give in a post-game presser, where he was like, yeah, it's unacceptable. He knows better. So the Jets get the 24-17 win here. Neither team is very good, so I wouldn't necessarily expect this game to have too much repercussions either way. But Aaron Rodgers still not looking back to MVP form. Edward, man, you're going for that Jets line Super Bowl. I mean, I guess it could happen.
One last chance to end Aaron Rodgers. I'll take that.
The Jets certainly do get a benefit of they are beneficiaries of the fact that Miami and Tua are now in question.
Yeah,
that AFC East is
opened up.
Yeah, not as scary. Although with New England playing better, you might not have to worry about Miami as much, but now you got to worry about New England. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the AFC East. And then, Jeffrey, we already talked about it, but Tampa Bay and the Lions, anything here to add before we move on to the next game?
I don't think so. We just got to come up and fight against the Cardinals because they're going to be a tough out for sure.
Yeah, and one thing that was interesting about this week, week 2, Jeffrey, is that there were 10 games played in that 1 o'clock window, which is the most games that are going to be played during the 1 o'clock window. And on NFL Red Zone, they had the Deca Box.
I've only ever seen the Octobox, man. The Deca Box.
They had the Deca Box going, and it was big time. Next up, we have the Baltimore Ravens, who are playing host to the Las Vegas Raiders. I got it right, didn't screw it up. And the Raiders getting a surprise 26-23 victory. Baltimore falling to 0-2 to start the season. A lot of question marks about that offensive line, Jeffrey.
The history does not, by the numbers, does not look good for 0-2 teams making the playoffs, 1, and 2, much less winning a championship. So it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back. The Raiders, Minshew and Devontae Adams cooked at the end of the game, got him with that fourth quarter comeback. I think I think the Raiders are a little bit more spicier than we thought. 2, we'll see how Lamar is, because you're right, that offensive line did not look good.
Yeah, it seems to me like Oakland's recipe for victory is to throw to 2 people, Brock Bowers and Devontae Adams. Let those 2 run crazy and just throw them the ball. And I think it's fair to say too, Jeffrey, regardless of what team you are a fan of, I think for the most part, everyone can appreciate Gardner Minshew as a quarterback, right? Like he's the guy that everyone seems to like. Am I misreading the situation there?
I think he's a little underrated. Yeah, he's not like, a top echelon quarterback, but he's definitely a starting quarterback in this league. He's much better than some of the starting quarterbacks we currently have, for sure. I've always been a Minshew man. Hide your wives.
I mean, I think it's the mustache. It's just it's the whole thing. The vibe checks out, man. It's good times watching Gardner behind center. A place where the vibes did not check out was in Arizona, at least for the Rams. 41-10 beat down the Cardinals delivered to the Rams. And through 4 quarters, Marvin Harrison Jr. in the season looked like a bust. And then in one quarter, one single quarter, we got up to 5. He looked like a Pro Bowl player with 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards in a single quarter.
Yeah, it's the sample size, man. It's crazy. Yeah, there were so many articles out there and people saying like, "Oh man, he didn't run this fast on those routes." Blah blah blah. First game, he showed exactly why they drafted him so high.
Seeing articles about like the death of the downfield wide receiver and everybody wanting the Tyreek Hill short route guys. A lot of that was being published, and then in just one game, he comes out there and it's like, "Yeah, I'm pretty good. Things will work out." Unfortunately for the Rams too in this game, they did lose Cooper Kupp, and it looks like he will be going to be missing some time as well. So they're down Cooper Kupp, down Puka Nacua. The Rams aren't a very deep team. Obviously, they invested a lot of their draft capital to push for the Super Bowl, and they got their Super Bowl, so it worked out. But that means nowadays with this Rams team, they're pretty top heavy. So when they get hurt, it hurts.
Their entire starting offensive line is now injured. Several backups who were on that line are now injured. Injuries running through the defense, like the defensive secondary. It's rough. I do feel bad. I do, because I hate to have teams go down due to injuries and all that, because it's these guys' livelihoods on the line. But like, man, it's going to be rough going, even for Sean McVay. Right? Mm-hmm. He's a great coach, but at some point you have to have talent out on the field.
Especially when you look at how talented the NFC West is as a division. You got the 49ers, you have the Cardinals, you have the Seahawks. There's a lot of good teams in your own division. You have to play each of them twice. And then you look at the rest of the NFC. It's going to be tough sledding. And, I think we saw what happens when they had at least a good amount of their weapons in week 1, they can be a very good team. And then even losing some weapons, we're still very, very competitive. But at some point, there's just that attrition level that's hard to make up for. And
you think Matt Stafford's having Detroit flashbacks with not having an offensive line and just going out there and having to like?
It might be a little bit different
because at least anymore, man. He can't take all that punishment.
It might just be like now, just because like it's all like the injuries. Because at least with the Lions, it was at least they didn't have anybody. There wasn't like they were waiting on somebody to come back that could like help fix things. There was no hope. It was just a hopeless situation, and that's what he had to live with. At least with the Rams, it's something where it's been bad luck and injuries that have sort of forced him into this position. And I mean, really, if we were talking something super spicy that's never going to happen, if I was the Miami Dolphins, you know what team I would be getting on the phone with trying to bring somebody down in a trade to help salvage the season.
Interesting. Getting Stafford to Miami?
Set up Stafford with Hill, A-Chain, Waddle. I'm just saying, that sounds pretty spicy to me.
I am a big Matt Stafford stan. I would love that for him, as long as it's not at the expense of Detroit.
I mean, they do all that talking about, oh, yeah, let's get Tom Brady out of the booth and bring him down here. He's getting $40 million to talk football. Matt Stafford, though, still here playing.
How has he been doing? I've not seen him comment.
Well, I've only seen a little bit, and I've seen a lot of jokes about how he says 6 words, and then he gets paid the $40 million. So some people have not been a fan. I don't know if you caught the roast of him on Netflix.
I caught the actor.
He comes off a little like you either like Tom Brady or you don't. I don't feel like there's not a lot of middle ground with him. He can be a little pretentious. So you either like the GOAT or you don't. And some people just don't like the GOAT. So
dang,
it's tough. Jeffrey, your lock of the week. You had the Chiefs over the Bengals, and they did
it by the skin of the teeth. They did it. I was getting a little sweaty during the game, but they pulled it off. Unfortunately for them, a lot of injuries. Hollywood Brown's out for at least the regular season. He might come back in January if they make it that far. Isaiah Pacheco out 6 to 8 weeks. It doesn't look good for them as far as that. But we've doubted them before, and they've got Patrick Mahomes, so they always have a chance. We got a thick 6 in the game, which is always great, getting a lineman touchdown. It's not Burrowhead, it's Arrowhead, man.
It was a very close one there, and of course that also means the Bengals fall to 0-2, Jeffrey. So two of the teams that are considered to be the creme de la creme in the AFC, and of course in the AFC North in particular, 0-2 between the Bengals and Baltimore.
Yeah,
Which
and
one of
that's a
those
tough
two?
division too. So
It
there's going to be
is.
a lot of cannibalism going on in there. It's going to be
And you know what's crazy? The team that is 2-0 in that division, the
the,
Pittsburgh Steelers.
let's go
And
smell.
what a great transition! I was hoping they were next in this. They got the win over Denver on Sunday, 13-6. They finally scored a touchdown. Up until then, it had been all field goals. But it ain't pretty, Jeffrey. But it's resulted in two wins in the win column. So, I mean, rumor
Yeah,
has it Justin Fields will be out there for Week 3. But what are your thoughts here about the Steelers and the Broncos?
it's a that's a crazy quarterback room, having Corny Russ and Fields there. But their defense is going to carry them and keep them in all of these games. And really, the offense just need to limit the mistakes, and they can kind of just grind out wins like this. That's kind of how Mike Tomlin likes to do it.
Hmm.
He's going to coach his way into another winning season, probably. So, I think on the other side with the Broncos, I mean, Bo Nix had a pretty hilarious press conference moment. They asked him like, "Oh, take us through what happened on that end zone." He's like, "Well, I dropped back and I threw it to the other team." So
Yeah.
it was a rough day for him. I wonder how long it's going to take for Sean Payton to throw him under the bus and anybody else under the bus if they keep losing. But yeah.
Yeah, I think he led the team too in rushing. So, of all the talk about the Denver running back and their offensive lines and things like that, or their backfield, surprising that Bo Nix is leading them in rushing yards. Something they probably want to address moving forward if they're going to be successful at all. Then Jeffrey, we have, I believe we should have my lock of the week here, and what ended up almost being, you asked me the what if it becomes a fiesta like the Titans in Bears game was the previous week. And, if the Chicago offense wasn't so terrible, Chicago's defense is good, but they had to spend so much time out on the field because Caleb Williams would just turn the ball over or they wouldn't be able to get things going and they would give it back to the Texans. Just the fatigue that put on the Bears defense that played very well against a very good defense or a very good offense. I'm a little scared of the Bears defense, to be honest. It's 2 weeks in a row they've stepped up and played well. But I think Caleb Williams and this offense are so bad that when the Lions do end up playing the Bears, we'll be able to take care of business because of that fact. Like, as good as the defense is playing, Caleb Williams and this Bears offense has looked equally as bad as they have looked good, and that sort of they've been canceling each other out. So
Yeah, offensive line issues also going on. I mean, he's athletic and he has got good escapability, but at some point you need to have some protection and some kind of pocket to stay in to be able to get it downfield, run your offense. And yeah,
yeah,
Stott looked good. It looks like another historical Bears quarterback start.
yeah, we already talked about the Panthers ruining Bryce Young. As an organization, there being that issue. Here's another organization sort of known for having issues with rookie quarterbacks not being a good destination for them. And again, it's only week 2, so we're not going to go too crazy. But through 2 weeks, Caleb Williams has not been put in a position to shine. Then, Jeffrey, the Monday night game, the concluder to week 2 here. Captain Kirk and the Falcons heading in to Philadelphia to take on Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. What do you got for us here about the Monday night game?
Well, they went into Philadelphia on Jason Kelsey night. They were honoring the great center, but Atlanta pulled it off, kind of in a crazy fashion. Come back during the game or during the fourth quarter.
How crazy is it that the Falcons are the team coming back in
I
the
know.
game?
If they wouldn't be able to do this with Desmond Ridder, this is what they brought Kirk Cousins into. And he's not looked completely back to form, but this was, to me, a vintage Kirk Cousins drive at the end of the game. And I am biased. I've seen Kirk Cousins play his entire career. So I've seen a lot of Kirk Cousins when we were at Michigan State. I watched him play through the NFL, and I would think he's a great quarterback. And he showed why teams want him under center.
Yeah, and I think he really shined there in that 2-minute drill because it was something where he could sort of instinctively play and just really take advantage of all his experience and just his natural instincts. And we saw that come through with some solid play there and getting that touchdown to Drake London right on Darius Slay there to end the game. And then, of course, the Eagles did get the ball back with a chance to respond. They got a chance for a rebuttal, and Jalen Hurts threw the pick. So,
that throw into double coverage, triple coverage, I think it was, is not good. He didn't get hit as he threw, but that was probably, he had 2 plays to get it. He wanted it all in 1 play, and they just couldn't do it. Makes me happy as a professional Eagles hater and Philadelphia hater that they went in there on Jason Kelce night and ruined their parade. But the Falcons.
Yeah, and I know, so with the Eagles having gotten the win against the Packers over in Brazil, that sort of quieted things down for a little bit. But after this loss to the Falcons, I've already started to hear, the whispers about Nick Sirianni start coming back up again. Obviously there was a lot made about him and Jalen Hurts not getting along.
About enough the kind of collapse that they had at the end of the year. Like an 11-win team having that big of a collapse at the end of the year just due to behind-the-scenes issues. It's pretty nuts, and I think there's going to be a hangover for it here, and I think Sirianni's on the hot seat.
Yeah, and as Detroit Fan Man says there, the Eagles eagled the game. It was it was rough and just not great there. Not great at all. All right, Jeffrey. Well, that does it for Grind the Grid, going through all of the Week 2 action. Of course, with the results from Week 2, Jeffrey, we now know the state of the NFC North here. So for the King of the North segment, we take a look, and sitting on top of the frozen throne that is the NFC North currently is the 2-0 Minnesota Vikings. Everybody else 1-1 currently. The Packers being the only team in Week 2 to get a win. Both the Lions and the Bears dropping games here. So right now, we haven't had any divisional games yet, so no one has a division record. But in terms of the overall records, 2-0 gets the Vikings, makes them our current King of the North. So obviously, Jeffrey, we want that back. We want to have our first ever back-to-back NFC North titles. But right now, we're all bending the knee, looking up at Minnesota. So kind of a surprise here to start the season.
Sam Darnold's world, we're just living in it. No, they've been playing good. They've been playing. I feel like they've been playing better than expectations, especially with their rookie quarterback going down. They were going to trot out McCarthy out there, start a new era over there. But even without him and the injury bug that hit them during the preseason, the offseason, I mean, they're playing pretty good, and they kind of scare me a little bit.
Yeah, certainly going to be. I'm looking forward to that first matchup against them, just to see how our offense stacks up against that defense, because that defense, they have played well. So I want to see how we look against it. So we'll get the answer to that question sooner rather than later. Of course, that comes after the bye week, so we get a chance to rest up and get ready for that game. I actually want to say, is that? Let me just double check here. I think that is the game. Oh no, we have the Cowboys after the bye week. So I was about to say, did we get the game plan over the bye week for Minnesota? Unfortunately, no. But we at least get to make sure we go into Dallas and get some revenge against those Cowboys.
That better be circled on the calendar for that team, kind of thing. Bulletin board material for it, because we should have won that game last year, but we were robbed.
Yeah, and I want to remember the Titans, the run the score up, leave no doubt type moment. I don't want there to be any question about the outcome of that game when we play the Cowboys. So, and we get to do it to them in Dallas. So that's always fun.
I'm scared of sending Dallas to play here in Detroit. They always send us over there.
All right, Jeffrey. Time for our final segment of this episode, our champs and chumps for the week. Let's go ahead and start with your champ here, Jeffrey. Who do you got this week as your champ?
I have to give it to Aiden Hutchinson at the defense, but him going off 5.5 sacks, just eating sack lunches all day on Sunday. You got to give it to him. He was living up to his superstar billing for sure. Do you want me to do my chump or?
I'll go here with my champ,
Okay.
and then we'll switch to the chumps. My champ, I am going to go with Brian Branch again, stepping up after having a rough week against the Rams the previous week. I like the quote from JMO about him being that guy that's hungry, that's always wanting to do better, and sort of having that being that fire that's burning and sort of pushing him forward. So he came out there and he played a much better game here against Tampa Bay. So glad to see Brian Branch back in things and expect to see more out of him as the season progresses. Jeffrey, who do you have as your chump?
Fortunately, I have to put up my man Dan Campbell as the chump of the week. He ultimately, I feel like his mistake they could not overcome, right? Or it gave them a way uphill battle that changes strategy and all kinds of things. You got to be better at those half situations. Don't send Jared Goff out there to get sacked needlessly. Don't take the points. You got a decent kicker. Let's see what he's made of, especially early on in the year, right? I mean, I'd rather gamble or I'd rather see what my kicker has in his game here. Get him some confidence, get him some easy completions, kind of thing, just get him going. Yeah, definitely Dan Campbell has to be my chump of the week.
Good choice. And my champ of the week, or sorry, my chump of the week, not champ. I'm going to go with, and I hate to do it because I am usually such a big fan of the offensive line. I'm going with Frank Ragnow. He's a guy who is one of the leaders of this team. He's a guy who's been to back-to-back Pro Bowls. Like, I know last season he was injured and he was playing through everything, but he definitely struggled here against Tampa Bay. And really, for us to be sort of the team we want to be and to truly be that team that has the best offensive line in the league, we need him to sort of play at that level. And so this week, hopefully he's just a blip on the radar, and it'll be, if he ever sees me on the street, he can just like punch me in the face and be like, "That's for making me your chump." Hopefully,
go tell it to his face.
I mean, try doing it. Well, Dan Campbell will probably accept it. He'd probably accept it, but Frank Ragnow probably.
He even accepted this as blame, and I do find that refreshing as a coach. Some coaches just coach speak the heck out of that and be like, "Nope, nothing's wrong. We just got to go out there and execute all that kind of stuff."
Yeah, I assume Frank Ragnow would essentially treat me like he was Chewbacca and would just like rip my arms out for cheating at chess or the hollow chess or whatever they're playing. So I assume that would be the outcome if I told him he was my chump. But at the same time, let's go. We got a Super Bowl that we're trying to make it to. We need him at top form. So, but long way to go, Jeffrey. It's week 2 now in the bag. We're looking ahead now to week 3. Again, we're taking on the Arizona Cardinals, and we'll be talking about that game at 11 a.m. on Sunday. That game is not until the later window, so it's a 4:25 kickoff time for that game. But we'll be, of course, having our pregame show 11 a.m. Sunday. So if you do enjoy what you've seen here today, you can, of course, join us again. We're coming to you live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And then, of course, you can also find us on, you can find us pretty much all everywhere. We have all the socials, Instagram, TikTok, whatever your viewing channel of preferences, you can usually find Lions Grid content. And we definitely appreciate all the help and support. Great to see such an active chat here during the show, and we appreciate everybody contributing. Yeah, there's so many people. Hatter's House 70, Detroit Fan Man, Edward Wallace, Champy. Thank you guys all for being here with us and contributing to the show. If you do want to help the channel grow, you can, of course, subscribe and like and all those good things. Definitely helps us out. And we'll be back on Sunday, Jeffrey, to talk about this Arizona matchup and hopefully do some prep work for what will eventually be a Lions victory and get us to 2-1 on the season.
Heck yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for tuning in. Again, I'm Kevin Marhine. He's Jeffrey Raymond. We'll catch you during the next episode. We hope you all have a great night. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.